We are learning that CNN will hold an exclusive interview with Kamala Harris, her first since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee. Her running mate, Tim Walz, will join as well for this first interview. This is also their first interview together as the Democratic ticket. Let's bring in our CNN political director, David Chalian. So, David, what are we learning?
Yeah, I mean, we have been waiting to see this next sort of important hurdle for Kamala Harris and her campaign to jump, which is after a very successful 6 weeks here since she became the Democratic nominee, coalesced the party behind her, raised a ton of money, injected enthusiasm, got a running mate, pulled off a convention. All of that, though, Alex, very scripted. Now, a couple other things coming up. They said they were going to schedule an interview, a sit-down interview, an extensive interview before the end of the month. That now is happening on CNN with our colleague Dana Bash, our anchor and chief political correspondent, down in Georgia. Harris and Walz are going on this bus tour starting tomorrow in Georgia. The interview will take place on Thursday. It will air as a primetime special at 9 p.m. Eastern here on CNN on Thursday. And as you noted, it is, of course, the first joint interview that the Democratic nominee and the vice presidential nominee are doing together, but it's also her first interview, the vice president, as the Democratic candidate. This is the first time she's going to take questions in a concerted effort like this in an interview format since Joe Biden 6 weeks ago upended this entire race by making that historic decision to bow out of his campaign, endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris, and that sent her on to these last 6 weeks here. And there are a lot of questions that have been lingering out there for her to answer as we go into this fall campaign.
And in speaking with the campaign, they've made the point that you just did. It's been a busy 30-plus days. She's had a lot to do, not least of which was last week at the DNC. But as you note, that was all very scripted. So how much more revealing can an interview like this be for the voters? And I guess more importantly, for those undecideds who are still going to be making up their minds the next few weeks.
Yeah, so I don't think voters look at it like we do and say, oh, do an interview, take more questions.
And
we in the press
afterwards,
love
perhaps,
it.
when
but
something...
Exactly, but I do think voters learn valuable information from a candidate seeking the highest office in the land about how they think in these unscripted moments and how they think through a pressing challenge or question that they are being asked. So they are valuable to voters. And in fact, you know, Kamala Harris had a bit of a rough go with one of these big interviews out of the gate as vice president. She sat down with NBC's Lester Holt, and she had some answers about whether or not why she hadn't yet visited the border. And her response to those questions have been obviously area of Republican critique, but throughout her first year as vice president, an area of Democratic concern about Harris's performance. She obviously has worked to address much of that, and we've seen a far different Harris in these last 6 weeks on the campaign trail, a far more sure-footed Harris. But now is the opportunity to hear her ruminate aloud with Dana asking her about her policy positions, her plans for the future, her plans for the country in an unscripted setting, and of course, to see the Democratic ticket with each other, interacting with each other.
And as political director, you're certainly going to have a hand in helping Dana with those questions and formulating those. What do you think are some of the issues that Dana's going to have to focus on?
Listen, I think it is pretty clear from all the surveys out there what the American people are focused on. The most important issues, time and again, we learn in every poll, the economy, is number one above all, the cost of living. Those are things that Kamala Harris herself addressed in that speech in North Carolina a couple weeks ago, but to flesh that out, no doubt. And it is what we hear day in and day out from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance on the campaign trail on the issue of the economy. It's what we see both the Harris and Trump campaigns spending all their advertising money on right now, sort of going back and forth in these battleground states on the airwaves over the economy. So that's issue number one for voters. But there are a whole host of issues of policy positions, both foreign policy and domestically, that we just haven't heard from her yet in this capacity as the Democratic nominee.
So this debate is going to be happening on Thursday, which
it's an interview, yeah.
Excuse me,
yes.
It's an interview, but it's happening just 2 weeks before the September 10th debate. So this will be her first unscripted moment, essentially, since the DNC, and in this interview fashion.
Exactly.
But David Chalian, stay with me. I want to turn to Kristen Holmes, who covers the Trump campaign. And Kristen, something we've heard time and time again from Donald Trump is that she has not sat down for an interview. She has not faced tough questions. We should note she has been getting some questions kind of in an ad hoc manner from reporters on the campaign trail. Donald Trump has held these press conferences in which he's actually been quite rude about it, saying that she's not smart enough to sit down and face these tough questions. Do you think that what she's doing now, sitting down with CNN for this interview, is going to take away that argument, mute some of that argument?
I think it might start a new argument. I think that what they're looking for is any sort of mistake, any sort of misstep, and that's partly why they are pushing her to do some sort of debate. Or interview. We know that she has, yes, taken questions from reporters, but as you said, it's been sparse, it's been here and there, sometimes it's in response to something, and in those settings, she can be whisked away at any time. That's how a campaign is. She's underneath a wing of an airplane usually. They want her to sit and answer for some of the questions, particularly on her policy. For example, the fact that she had ran actively against fracking and now says she's not that opposed to fracking. That obviously comes at a time where Pennsylvania might be one of the most critical states in the 2024 election, and fracking is something that is important to a lot of voters there. They are hoping that she will get grilled on these various topics because what they have seen is that she has not been out there in the spotlight. Now, if you talk to Democrats, if you talk to a lot of people who know Kamala Harris, who know her well, they say that she has developed over the last several years, that she is a different person than she was when she made those first gaffes early on in her tenure as vice president, when she was not as exposed. But if you talk to Republicans, they believe there's a reason she hasn't sat down for an interview, that Democrats are really trying to capitalize off this moment. And there might be some fear, and again, this is talking to Republicans, that there's something there, that she might make those same missteps that she made back in 2020 or in 2021 during those interviews. David mentioned the Lester Holt interview, for example. Just a reminder, that Lester Holt interview is played on repeat when Republicans run ads against Kamala Harris, particularly on immigration. So part of what they're looking for here is another opportunity on that, because right now what she's had is a pretty great 6 weeks and a lot of momentum and a bounce. They're looking for anything that might shift that and the opportunity to have her answer for some of those policies.
They're looking essentially for new fodder because
Right.
they've had
It's a political campaign. Of course they are, yeah.
Trying to go after her after the president dropped out. Eva McCann, you follow the Harris campaign. There has been this discussion over to what extent she actually needs to sit down with a journalist, take these tough questions. She's essentially saying, and agreeing to this, that yes, this is a vital part of the process. So what do you think that she and her running mate are going to be looking to accomplish in this interview?
So I think that this will answer to some of the criticism that she's faced. This will be an opportunity for her to show that she has a good mastery of the policy issues, most important to most Americans. I haven't heard this clamoring for her to do this interview as much from her supporters as I heard from my colleagues here, but certainly I understand why there is this appetite for this. But Alex, I also think that she's going to use this interview to try to connect with Americans. You know, she has talked a lot about her economic policy, and what really strikes me about that is so much in talking about the policy is her trying to connect with everyday Americans, talking about growing up in a working class family, really being intentional about saying, hey, I know what it is like to struggle. I worked at McDonald's as a young person, and I saw some of my colleagues back then when I was a college student try to make that salary work to raise an entire family. So yes, she is going to now be in a position where she has to answer for some of these reversals on key policy issues. But I think she's also going to use the platform to try to be relatable and try to get more people to really like her, understand her, empathize and connect with her.
And David, they're doing this together, which is quite notable. They've been trying to play up their relationship and how they get along quite well. What are the advantages and disadvantages of sitting down to this joint interview?
Well, first of all, this is a pretty traditional play out of a media playbook in a campaign. Once a nominee has chosen a running mate, we have often seen in the following weeks them sitting down for a joint interview. In fact, Kamala Harris was in the other role just 4 years ago when she and Joe Biden sat down for a joint interview after he put her on the ticket. So that's something we see. But I also just think this, in addition to everything we've discussed about she just hasn't done this yet, and we're going to be able to see her think in front of us about these policy positions and what she wants to communicate to the American people. But also, there has been nobody in our lifetime that has been put in a position in presidential politics like Kamala Harris has in these last 6 weeks. So that's just a fascinating thing to understand about what she's been experiencing as she had this big change of her plans moment at the end of July when Joe Biden stepped away from this and endorsed her, and she immediately stepped in and coalesced the party behind her. We just haven't seen anything like that, Alex. And so also just understanding how she is processing that is going to be an interesting, I think, part of just hearing her in this moment.